Welcome to another section of the Boat Expo. Today we're here with Caroline Mantell, and she is at Boat History Report. Caroline, thanks for being with us and sharing everything that you guys do over there.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having us. We're looking forward to talking.
So, Boat History Report. Let's first start by sharing what you guys do, and then I'll share why I thought it was important to invite you on to this expo.
So I guess the easiest way or the best way that we've been described is as the Carfax for boats. So if you're researching a pre-owned boat, you can run the history report on it and you can figure out where the boat's been and roughly how many owners it's had, if it's been involved in any sort of significant negative events that would jeopardize the safety or your investment in the boat.
Yeah, that's exactly with this expo. So many people, the best choice for them is to go with the pre-owned boat. But there are so many times there are things that are kind of hidden issues that are nearly impossible to see. And one of the things I love that you guys have on your website is this little find the hidden damage thing. I don't know how you do it tech-wise, but if you look at this, I think it's a Sea Ray Sundancer. And when you scroll over the image, it will show you the damage that was there prior to being fixed. So what looks like a perfectly nice boat, if you and I were to visually inspect it, probably run our hands across the gel coat and it looks great. But what you don't know is that obviously they hit a piling or something bad happened on this boat that may cause other issues a year, 6 months, 5 years down the line that you want to know about. Tell us about these pictures and how you came up with this information.
Yeah, so we work with some repair yards and we're able to get some good examples of their work before and after. And, in the case of these images, these boats were all repaired to better than new standards, but we see more often than not that that's not the case, that there's a quick job that's done on them. It covers damage at a very basic level. And then a year or two down the road or down the way, the waterway, you find out that it wasn't actually repaired that well, and you've got a huge mess on your hands. And worse yet is if it creates a safety issue. And so we just thought this would be a great example, a great way to give the visual to somebody of what could be hiding underneath that gel coat.
Yeah, there's so many things, and with boats, it's one of the unfortunate things is some stuff is easy to fix, hard to fix right. So yes, I can patch this and I can do a fiberglass job and make the gel coat look okay, but did you back it properly? Did you use the right type of resins and the right mixtures and the right weave of the actual fiberglass, and how did you patch it? Yeah, those things are hard to do right, and there's not always the best repair done. Sometimes it's, hey, let's get the cheapest repair done, we'll sell it, and we'll get something different and leave somebody else with this issue.
Right. Yeah, you're exactly right. And it's expensive to repair it the right way. It's time consuming. We actually see pretty often boats that are sold through auction that are turned around and immediately put back on the market. So, a lot of times the boats that have the water damage and were swamped in salt water, spent a little time on the bottom, they're pulled up, they're cleaned up, and then they're sold immediately before corrosion sets in or before some of the other major issues that are going to come about actually start to present themselves. And so, it's like you said, it's hard to do it right. It takes a long time and it's expensive, and that's not good for turning a profit.
Yeah, exactly. And my personal belief is most people are good, most people are honest, but when it's my checkbook being used, I'm gonna trust but verify, and I'm gonna double check some things and not just take everybody's word for it. I told you this before we started, but I've got a friend buying a used Sea Ray, and he said, "Okay, I've got the boat. Here's what I want. I've got the offer in." I said, "Okay, let's slow down. First of all, great boat. I think you're on the right track, but get a boat history report and let me call a technician friend that can go and inspect the boat. We'll do a full sea trial. We'll pull the drive. We'll do a compression check. We'll check all the fluids." I said, those are things that you just have to do when you're buying a used boat. Invest a couple $100 in all of that to make sure that your several $1,000 investment is going to be a smart one.
Yeah. You've got to, your friend is very lucky because not everybody gets that advice, but it's excellent advice. You're exactly right.
Yeah, and hopefully that's what I'm sharing with this expo, with everything we give on the channel is if you don't have that boating friend, well, I'll be your boating friend, and I'll provide that insight, and you as well. So now you're in the boating friend community. So welcome.
That's what boating's all about.
Yeah, exactly. If you don't wave when you're on a boat, you shouldn't be on a boat. You're just friendly people. So, what are some of the common issues that you've seen in the time with Boat History Report that it surprised you, or that you see too often?
Yeah, well, I'll say when I initially started with Boat History Report, I didn't realize the amount of fraud that was out there in the boating industry. I thought that boaters were friendly people, honest people, and like you said, the majority of them are. But unfortunately, there's a couple bad seeds, like there are in any industry. And so some of the things that we've seen, things are a little bit different right now because of COVID. So inventory is a challenge. And with inventory and high demand comes accurately pricing a vessel. And so trying to determine, based on the need, what is a good value for this boat. And unfortunately, we see a lot of fraudulent activity around that because people are so eager to get boats that they rush into it. Kind of like you told your friend, slow down, let's do these other basic pieces just to make sure. We do see a lot of people rushing into it because they're afraid they're going to lose the deal because it's so hard to find inventory right now. But the bigger ones, and the reason that Boat History Report was even started are things like, has the boat been involved in an accident? Was it tossed around in a hurricane? Is it a stolen vessel? Is there something else that's happened to this boat that I need to know about? And who's selling the boat? Is the seller an honest seller? The information that they're telling me, the seller told me it's a one-owner boat and it's always been in Florida, but I ran the history report and I can see that it's been titled 4 times. It's been in Texas. It's been in Louisiana. It just moved to Florida 6 months ago. So, is the information honest that's being presented to you? Does it match what you're hearing? Does it match the boat? Those are some of the bigger things that we've seen a lot lately. And I not even lately, really, since I started with Boat History Report, it's very eye-opening to me to learn, in any industry, just how much fraud is out there. I tend to live life very trusting and
Yeah. When you talk about, approximately 1 million boats sold every year, yeah, there's going to be some people trying to take advantage and trying to unload, and we've seen it lately with COVID, trying to unload their, I'll say project boat, but trying to unload a boat as, hey, this is ready to go, hit the water and go, when, man, there's some issues. One thing I hear on social media a lot as I comment and try to help people in Facebook groups and things like that is, I'm buying this boat. There's no title, or they just have a bill of sale. What are some of those issues look like? And, what's your experience on how easy they are or hard they are to fix and get registered, titled properly in whatever state they're in?
Yeah, we actually deal with that quite a bit, with people saying, I'm having a hard time getting the title. I only got the bill of sale. And it's tricky to overcome something like that because the states are very specific. They want the previous title or the previous registration, especially if you're moving the boat to a new state. I would say, anytime that you are buying a boat, you absolutely want to have the bill of sale, but you also need the registration or the title. And there's still 9 states that don't title boats. So if you're coming from one of those 9 states, you're not going to have the title, but the registration itself will have an opportunity to sign it over. And when you go to a state that does title, for example, Georgia just started titling boats in June of last year. But prior to that, if you bought a boat in Georgia and moved it to Florida, you wouldn't have a title that you could turn in, but you'd be required to turn in the registration. So, when you buy a boat through Facebook Marketplace or through Craigslist or through eBay, if you don't do your due diligence to get that paperwork at the time of sale, it's almost impossible to get it. And then you have a really, really hard time registering and titling and using it. So you absolutely, that's, I mean, I am a member of the, boating is all about acronyms. So I am a member of the NASBLA VERT Committee, which is the National Association of State Boating Law Administrators Vessel Identification, Registration, and Titling Committee. And one of the things that we're constantly faced with are situations like this where, a title or a registration either is missing or it doesn't have accurate information on it. The previous state recorded the whole ID incorrectly, and now the new state is trying to register the boat, but the documentation doesn't match the vessel. And so things like that are things that you want to look for when you're buying a boat. You want to make sure that, one, the person selling the boat matches the documentation. So does their driver's license information match what's on the documentation? And two, does what's on the documentation match the vessel? Because if you have documentation that's one letter off in your whole ID, it's a totally different boat. And it doesn't matter if that boat doesn't exist. It's just like a person's social. If you get one letter wrong in your social security number, it's for a different person. So you have to make sure that that information is all correct. And if it's not correct, have the seller correct it before you take ownership.
Yeah, and you hit several things that I think are key for people to get. One is get that information before you write the check, because once that money is exchanged hands, no matter how nice and friendly they are, their life goes on, and your priority goes from number 1 to check in the bank number 99. And that's just, it's personal nature. The other thing you mentioned is get those serial numbers and copies of everything at that time. So that's boat, that's motor and our motors, and that's trailer if there's a trailer, because each one is its own individual unit, and may, depending on where you live, what state you're in, may need to be registered separately with even different organizations. The DMV for the trailer, the DNR or wildlife or whatever is in your state for the boat and motor. If it's an outboard, you may have 3 potential titles that you've got to get worked through.
Yeah, you're exactly right. That's actually, I'm glad you mentioned it. There's 22 states that register boats in the DMV, and the other states are all outside of the DMV. So whether it's the DNR, FWC, whatever division it is in that state, Parks and Wildlife, they do it separately from the trailer. And those are different titles that are issued. There's a handful of states that do title outboards. And if you're titling your boat, registering and titling your boat in a state where boats are registered in an entity separate of the DMV, usually there's a better chance that whole identification number is going to be correct. But when you're titling a boat that's in a DMV state, you have to keep in mind DMVs do 1 boat for every 40 used cars and 1 new boat for every 57 new cars. So they're handling boats significantly less than they're handling cars. There's a lot less transactions, and so they're just not as versed in verifying the format of a whole ID. And there's also not a checksum in the whole ID like there are on cars. If you enter a car's VIN and you get 1 character wrong, it alerts you because there is something coded into that VIN to tell you, no, this isn't correct. But on a boat, it's not like that. And so they can enter a 1 instead of an I, and now suddenly you've got, via clerical error, you've got a different boat. And so, there are a lot of things to watch out for. Now, in 2017, they passed a law that requires every single state to verify the whole identification number before doing anything with registration or titling, which is either a signed affidavit, a pencil tracing, a photograph. And so these issues have been corrected immensely. It's still possible that they happen, but they've taken enormous steps into ensuring the accuracy of the whole ID, which is fantastic, especially right now when boating is just, skyrocketed, which is fantastic. But you always just want to do your due diligence and do your verification, because you don't want to get into a situation where now you're spending lots of time trying to get it corrected.
Yeah, you're exactly right. I'm going to define a couple of things for people that are newer. The HIN, hull identification number, is the serial number for the boat. That this number equals this hull of the boat, and that's going to be on the rear of the boat, on the starboard side or the right side as you're facing towards the boat in the back. So that's the hull identification number, or HIN. The engine serial number, if it's an outboard, will be in a couple of different places on the outboard, a sticker. You may have to search for it if it's a little bit older. And then the VIN, our vehicle identification number on the trailer, should be stamped in several places on the trailer, or be on a sticker. Again, if it's older, you may have to really search for it. And those are key things to match up on the paperwork and on the actual thing itself. So don't just take it from one place, take it from the registration and then go take it from the boat and make sure that they're matching up to avoid those issues.
Yeah, absolutely. And if I may add, on the hull identification number, it's just a couple of inches from the top of the vessel. So it should always be above the water line. It can either be stamped into the fiberglass or into the aluminum, or it can be on a metal plate that's permanently affixed onto it. One of the other things that you can do to verify, so you've verified that it matches the paperwork, you verified that the paperwork matches the seller, but you also want to verify that that whole ID matches what they're telling you the boat is. And so we see very often someone comes to us and says, I was told this is a 2016 Sea Ray. And when we look at the whole ID, it's actually a 2012 Sea Ray. And so the value is not what they're anticipating that it's actually worth. And there's additional issues because now you've got a boat that's even 4 years older than expected. So, you know, you want to check that information as well, not just that it matches all of the paperwork, but that it also matches what you're being told it is.
And it's really surprising how many people don't know the make of their boat or the year of their boat. It is not uncommon to have somebody think their boat is a couple years newer. It's always newer for some reason, a couple years newer than what it actually is. I don't know how that works, but that is exactly what happened. So as we're talking about titles, that's awesome information. I appreciate you sharing all that. I think that's going to save a bunch of people a major headache and issue and money. But let's talk about salvage titles as well, because that's another issue that can pop up that, man, you may just not know about it.
Right. Yeah. So one of the most common things that we see when we see someone selling a boat that's not up to the standard that we want it to be is they blatantly advertise, very bold, all capital, clean title. And unless you're in Virginia, Connecticut, DC, Hawaii, or Florida, clean title means absolutely nothing. Every state has clean titles. And even
really, I did not know that.
Titles.
I didn't realize that was the like kind of a weasel clause language.
Yeah, because in a car, you want a clean title. It's something you look for. So on boats, people assume that the same protections are there on boats that are there on cars. It's called the Uniform Certificate of Title for Vessels Act. And it was passed in 2011. There's only been 5 states that have adopted it so far. And again, those are DC, Virginia, Hawaii, Connecticut, and most recently Florida. But Florida doesn't enact it until 2023. And what it allows for is a hull damaged title. So depending on the state's specific laws, there's a threshold. And if a boat is damaged beyond that threshold, it's required to be documented on the title. So saying that you have a clean title, congratulations, but just about every state has clean titles. So it's just something to be aware of. You know, it's very possible that the boat is still in outstanding condition. There are more good people than bad people, but it doesn't guarantee that the boat has a clean, the boat has a clean title. It doesn't guarantee that it has a clean bill of health. So it's just something to think about. Boat History Report was actually instrumental in getting that law passed in Florida. And you might think, well, that seems silly. If the title shows that it's hull damaged, why, would someone use your service? And, in each of these states, until every state enacts it, it's an amazing law and every state needs to get on board, which is why we push it so hard. But until every state enacts it, you can move a boat from state to state. If it doesn't have that type of title or that brand, then unfortunately there's the potential to lose it. And also when it becomes active in 2023, it's only going to be from that point going forward. So it's not going to include anything older, as is in the states that have enacted it as well. So there is something out there. There are protections that are being put in place to help boaters on the same level that they help cars. But currently, a clean title just means that that state has not enacted. It doesn't always mean but can mean that that state has not enacted the hull damage ban in their state.
Interesting. That, yeah, that is very, very useful. Now, you guys have done thousands and thousands and thousands of these boat history reports and inspected the hull identification numbers. Are there any commonalities or consistencies or things that you see common on any specific types of vessels that's maybe more common than others to really be on the lookout for?
You know, as far as specific types of vessels, I will say if you're buying a jet ski, there's a higher likelihood that there's damage. We actually just recently came across a jet ski that had 6 individual accidents reported.
Oh, wow.
So 6 different times. It was 2011. And in the last 10 years, it's had 6 different accidents. So jet skis tend to have more damage just because of the nature of the beast with the jet ski. But in general, you know, it really just depends on location. You know, if you're in Florida, you're concerned about saltwater use, or, you know, any coastal state, you're concerned about saltwater use, which is something to keep an eye out for. And depending on the type of boat, it's guaranteed that it was used in saltwater versus freshwater. If it's a documented boat, it was most likely used in saltwater. There's no reason for a documented boat to be used in a landlocked lake. So things like that, I think, would be common things to keep in mind. You know, just different things that you have to look for depending on the type of use that it has.
Yeah, that's for sure. We're talking to surveyors, we're talking to technicians, so we'll get into the technical side of that. If you haven't watched those videos, make sure that you do check those out. But let's talk a little bit about the inner workings of boat history report. So I want to make sure that I'm not getting one of these boats here that you know, has some hidden damage that I didn't know. Where are you getting your information from? How accurate is it? Talk about that a little bit. And I'm going to pull up an actual report that a sample one that you sent me.
Yeah, so that's the number one question we have is, where do we get our information? We work with insurance companies, we work with the National Insurance Crime Bureau, law enforcement, auctions, state registration and titling agencies, U.S. Coast Guard, every possible source that we can work with, we do work with or are working on partnerships with. And so, you know, just like a Carfax, we're never going to be 100% perfect. It's just impossible. But we have done everything absolutely possible to make sure our reports are as accurate as possible. And with that comes an enormous database. We have 1.4 million unique negative events in our database. We have 22 million unique hull IDs. We have over 120 million unique records. And then just some more, I'm in Florida, so obviously Florida is, you know, a very heavy boating state. But if you just look at actively registered boats in the state of Florida, and this is just based on our data, so the data that we have, actively registered boats, 1 in every 29 actively registered, actively used boats has some sort of significant negative event in its history. And depending on what county you are in, that number goes as high as 1 in 5. And I'll let you guess where in the state that is a little bit higher than other parts, but it does go as high as 1 in 5 actively registered boats with a negative event. So we're the only organization that works with law enforcement directly. We work with the state's registration and titling. I've already mentioned the NASBLA BERT committee, which is the boating law administrators. I'm the vice chair, so we're working with them to work on accuracy in hull identification and things that we can do to better protect boaters. The National Insurance Crime Bureau, I think I mentioned. Marine surveyors is another great, excellent source for us. We, you know, strongly recommend to anybody that's about to put any sort of significant amount of money, you know, it doesn't matter how much money it is, if it's significant to you, it's significant. And we strongly encourage you to have a marine surveyor inspect it, like you suggested to your friend, have a technician check the engine for compression, check oil samples. I mean, all of those things are critical. We're going to give you the history of the vessel. They're going to give you the actual physical present condition. And so, yeah, that's a little bit about our company and accuracy.
No, that's perfect. That's what I was looking for, because here's what kind of the point of all the used boat. You're shopping for a used boat, and I think for a lot of people, used is a great way to go, especially for first-time boaters. It's going to save you some money. It's going to, if you put your ding in it, and you're going to ding your boat at some point. I will ding a boat running it, and I've been running boats for a long time. It happens. I like used boats as a way to go for a lot of people. When you buy a used boat, you take on a lot more risk. But if you do those things, get a technician to inspect the engine, get a surveyor to inspect the structure and the hull, get the boat history report, and follow all of the videos and the information in this expo and on our YouTube channel, and get that checklist. When you do all those things, you can really minimize, you can't make it zero, but you can really minimize that risk that you take on, even as a brand new first-time boat buyer, with all of that information, with investing, the whatever, $50 for the boat history report, $100, $200 for a technician, maybe depending on the size of the boat, a couple $100 to $1,000 on a survey, which we'll talk about when that's necessary and when it's not. But you can minimize that risk to very, very little, and then a good solid sea trial. And that's where I think when you put them all together, it makes avoiding that break out another 1,000 moniker that boating gets a bad rap for, too. Oh, now I made all the smart choices up front, and I weeded out those boats that are going to be a hassle. And now I can just go enjoy it with my family.
Yeah, and another great thing to do too, if you're buying a pre-owned boat, is to check the warranty on it. So a lot of boats have, a semi-significant warranty, and a lot of times they're transferable if you look into it. So if it's on the newer end of pre-owned, definitely look into the warranty with the manufacturer, see if it's transferable, and then make sure that that's part of your negotiation, that the current owner is going to do what they need to do to transfer that warranty into your name, just to give you a little more protection on it.
Yeah, that's a great point. There may be a $50 transfer fee or something like that, but it's pretty easy to do in most cases. And and just one more risk eliminator, risk reducer, which is what I think it's all about. So there's some other people that do what you guys do in the marketplace. The reason I selected you to join in this program was from my understanding is you guys have a larger breadth of database and a deeper source of information that you're pulling from. Are you guys in all 50 states when you're pulling data?
Yeah, we pull information from all 50 states. And, we started back in 2005. So we're the longest, oldest operation that there is. There are a couple that have popped up more recently, but we have data that goes back, we started in 2005, but we have data that goes back prior to that. In the state of Florida, for example, our data goes back to 1969. So it goes back even before hull identification numbers became standard with a standard HIN format. So, I kind of mentioned it before, but we're not just an organization that is here to sell reports. As I mentioned, I'm actively involved with the National Association of State Boat and Law Administrators, with the International Association of Marine Investigators, the National Insurance Crime Bureau, law enforcement. We work directly with law enforcement to help recover theft, to help discover if there's an accident, if there were some intentional reasons to it. We work with insurance companies, financial institutions, things like that. So we've been in the business the longest. Our database, we have the largest aggregate of data that exists. And we also do other things because of the types of data we have and the history that we have. We do things that are unique, like cluster matching, where we can take different pieces of information and match them together to ensure that the data is all there that needs to be. For example, in an accident, if an accident is reported only using the state identification number, the state registration number, we can then match that along with other parameters such as manufacturer and year in our database, and add the hull identification number to it so that it shows up for that vessel. So we can do a lot of really unique things like that. It's actually one of the ways that we work with marine investigators and insurance companies is verifying hull identification number formats. We can take a partial hull ID and we can populate the rest of it based on the data and based on standards. And so we've really put ourselves out there to help the industry and not just ourselves. And I know it sounds like like I was being self-serving or whatever it is, but like I said, I mean, with the Uniform Certificate of Title for Vessels Act, there is a chance that it could hurt our business. But in the long run, anything that helps the marine industry helps our business, and it helps boaters and helps what we love become more available to others.
Yeah. I love the approach. I had another company reach out to me and say, hey, we want to get involved in what you're doing. We'll pay you a big affiliate commission, the biggest in the industry. And I said, well, that's great. And I you guys will pay me an affiliate commission as well if somebody does buy a boat history report from what I provide. But I said, and it's smaller. I said, tell me about where your data is coming from. Tell me about the databases you hit. Tell me about what states you're in. He said, well, we're not in all the states. It's too expensive to get all of the states. They weren't even in Florida. I said the biggest boating community, the biggest boating state, and they weren't in there. And if I'm going to recommend something, I'm recommending it to my friend. I was in his wedding. If I'm going to recommend it to my friend, then I'll recommend it to you. If I wouldn't recommend it to a guy whose wedding I was in, then I'm not going to recommend it to anybody else, no matter what the commission is. So I really love that the way you guys approach this, and it's not just a money grab. It's hey, this is a real true value, and this is going to help a lot of people over time avoid a costly mistake. So
yeah, we appreciate that. There's you get what you pay for, and we pay a lot of money. we make sure that
I know getting into those databases was, one, not easy to get set up,
right.
But two, I'm sure there's some continuous checks going out to pay for access to them and keeping everything up to date. So let's look at this report. We've got a report up on the screen from a Yamaha. It looks like a 2011 Yamaha. Anything that you want to point out on this that is important for folks to know what they're going to get?
Yeah, so first I want to say, if your report comes back clean, you should pat yourself on the back and feel good about it, because we have checked through 120 million records. We've checked through 1.4 million negative events, and your boat is showing a clean history, which is fantastic. But if your report does have a negative event, this report, for example, does, this is what it might look like. So this is the basic summary. And then if you click on each section, you'll actually see details. So if you click on that accident section, you'll see that it gives you some specifics as to what happened with the accident, what the estimated value was, I think based on the law enforcement officer that reported it, the date, you have a general whereabouts of where it happened. And then it's got state registration data. This boat in particular has been in 2 states, and it goes all the way back to 2011 when the boat started, but it's been in Georgia and Alabama. And then it's got some basic warranty and recall information in the bottom. So this is a good example if there is a negative event. We also have Coast Guard data, which populates, especially in Florida, a lot of boats come back with that Coast Guard documentation data. It's pretty fascinating to see how many boats change states. I don't have specific stats, but it's always interesting to me when I look at a customer's report and I see how many states that boat has been in, especially when there's a negative event. It's common, especially when like a hurricane comes through Florida, all of a sudden these boats show up in Kansas to avoid that hurricane stigma. So we see that a lot. If a boat went from like Florida to Kansas and you kind of look at the timeline, hopefully the boat, if it was damaged, it already says damaged, but you can also look at the timeline on things like that and gather some additional information. So
yeah, there's a lot of detail in this. And like you said, a clean report, to me is money spent on lowering that risk. And that, hopefully if you're at the point where you're going to get a history report, you're going to hire somebody to inspect it, a technician and or a surveyor, you want that all to come back clean. And it's just insurance that you're not going to have a $5,000 bill come up. Not that it can't happen, but you've reduced that risk a bunch. And that's why I like it.
It's exciting to see a report that has damage, but it's not what I want. I don't want to get to that point and then find out it has damage.
And I told my buddy James that we're going to look at that Sea Ray on Saturday. I said, listen, here's my approach: is you find the right boat, You assume everything is right, but you verify it. And as soon as you find something that is a big enough issue, and I will tell him what those are, is walk away. There's always going to be another boat. So if you get a boat history report and you're like, it's not clean, is it big enough to walk away and walk and find the new one? But hopefully it's clean and you take the next step. Now I'm going to invest the $200 to get a technician to check it out and do a sea trial. That checks out clean. Great. Maybe I do the survey, or maybe I did that before. Everything checks out. Great. Now my family and I are loving boating, and we've reduced the risk as much as we possibly can for as minimal investment, as we can. So,
right. You have a lot more confidence going into boating, which is important. You need to have confidence when you're boating, because a lot can come up and a lot can happen, and it's so much fun and it's a blast. But you want to have confidence in the boat that you're in, and you want to have confidence in your ability as a boater. And so, just because a boat has damage doesn't mean that it's not a worthy investment. It just means you want to spend a little bit more time inspecting to make sure that the repairs have been made to what the standard that they should, or that it's not something significant that's going to affect you later on. So all we're doing is presenting you with the information so that you can make a more informed decision as you choose to go forward. It's also a great price negotiation. So, if the report comes back with a negative event, you can use that, and you think that it's something that you can overcome, or you feel confident in the repairs, then you can use that as a negotiation, because now that buyer, you as the buyer, are going to have this report in the future as well. And so, it kind of affects everything in the long run. So you can use that as you're negotiating the price of the boat.
Yeah, that's perfect. So other than the boat history report, I know you're a boater and have been around boats for a long time. You obviously chose to work in the marine industry, so you have a passion for it. Is there any other thing that, other than the boat history report, that you think is important to check when you're looking at a used boat? Anything else that would be that red flag of, okay, slow it down. Let's see if there's anything to really worry about here.
Yeah, so we kind of have touched upon a few of those things. Obviously, the survey, the technician, check warranty. One of the most critical things is check the whole identification number, make sure it matches up to the paperwork. Somebody says, well, I have the bill of sale. They signed the bill of sale. Well, who gave them permission to sign the bill of sale? That's why you need the title and registration. But another thing to look for, like you have mentioned to your friend, let's slow down, let's do our due diligence. You want to make sure that if it's too good to be true, it's actually true and not just too good. And so, we've seen, everyone has heard of the Nigerian prince scam, or the person that just went to the military, or the person that was just widowed. And it's horrible that people would use that to perpetuate a scam, but unfortunately it does happen. Another type of scam that we've seen, I kind of mentioned, is taking the boat out of state so that it avoids the stigma of some sort of damage. Just recently we've started seeing, especially like on Craigslist, where somebody is selling a boat. They say that it's in one state, like Louisiana, for example, and you contact them and they're like, oh no, it's actually in Montana. We're a consignment store. This actually just happened last week. We helped a customer who ran the whole identification number on our site. It didn't come back with state data. So to them, that was a red flag, because there was no registration history on it. It had nothing. So they contacted us. Turns out the whole ID was a fraudulent whole ID. When we looked at the website, it was legit. If I had gone to that website, I would have felt comfortable buying from that website. It had everything that you can expect. It was better than most real legit websites. Except it was just made last week. And, they had reviews on there that went back to like 2014, but the website was just made last week. And when we looked more into it, it was all very much a scam. And so you want to make sure you're avoiding scams. If they tell you to pay with eBay gift cards, don't do it. If they tell you that you can't physically inspect the boat for X, Y, or Z reason, walk away. There will be other opportunities. You're going to have an opportunity to get the right boat, but the last thing you want to do is fork over a significant amount of money to somebody that disconnects the phone, disappears, and the cops say, we can't help you because you weren't smart enough to avoid a scam yourself. Not that they would say that, they would help you, but the point is they can't do anything if somebody behind the internet that you've never met, that you have no real information on, takes your money and disappears. The good news is, scammers only commit scams on days that end in Y. So if it's not a day that ends in Y, you'll be fine.
That's what you need to do. Look out for that. So you mentioned something that I want to dive deeper into. You said they came up with this history report, and there was something that caused a red flag. They reached out to you, and you dug a little bit deeper. Is that something that is common for you to do? Was that kind of a friend of somebody that you helped out, or is that just the way you guys do it?
That's what we do. I mean, the system is designed to be automated, so it should be seamless and you shouldn't have to contact us. But if you do find something in your report that doesn't make sense, or you have a question about something, we are there. And our goal is always 24 to 48 hours. We're a small company, so it might take 48 hours to get back to you. But I mean, that is, like, we love it. We should have been private investigators, because it's exciting to be able to help our customers. It's something different, and we do it regularly, so it's not super different, but it's just something that breaks up the monotony of any job, any regular job. And so it also gives us an opportunity to work with law enforcement that we know well because of our partnership with other organizations. And through those connections, we were actually able to shut down this particular fraud in a matter of a couple of days.
Oh, wow.
And so that's the kind of stuff, we love it. And we hate anybody that has to go through it, because it puts a bad taste in your mouth, and you don't want boating. And that's, like, boating is such a fun way to get out, get fresh air. Right now, safely social distance, try something new. There's so many activities around boating. And so when somebody has an experience like that and they can't get the help they need, it turns them off from boating immediately. And so we like having a small piece in hopefully keeping boaters as boaters.
Yeah.
And like I said, it's fun. I mean, it's the stories that we hear, and we had somebody that ran a history report, came back as a total loss. They emailed us. The person selling it said, no, your information's wrong. It's not accurate. There's nothing wrong with this boat. And so we looked into it more, and it turns out it was in a marina in Michigan that was directly next to a factory. And that factory suffered an explosion that sent shockwaves through all the boats. There were like 68 boats that were totaled in this marina. And the insurance company for all of those boats totaled all of those boats. One, it blew out the windows, obviously, but they also had no idea what the long-term effects were of this. And so we were able to see that the seller had bought it from auction and was selling it quickly before anything significant happened. And so, one, we helped the buyer, and two, secretly we thought, we stopped.
Yeah, just stick it to them. Yeah, it's the hidden damage, those things that you just can't see, and you would have. There's no other way that would have been discovered.
Right.
There's no inspection checklist that I provide that is going to help you find something like that. And that's gonna hurt you when you go to sell it as well. That's a great story. So, any issues with buying a boat out of state? So you mentioned boats going from hurricane, Carolina, Georgia, Florida, to the Midwest, where we can sell it. Nobody will think about hurricanes there. Any issue of me in Missouri and buying a boat in Tennessee? Anything that you see there that people should be on the lookout for or aware of?
Yeah, so I think some of the things that you want to understand are what are the state registration and titling laws in the state that you're buying it from versus the state you're bringing it to, and make sure you understand what you're going to need when you bring it into your state. If it's coming from a non-title state, what documentation do you need to have? What are the tax implications? How does that change something? Do you have somebody, if you can't personally inspect the vessel, do you have somebody that you trust that can personally inspect the vessel? You want to make sure you have physical eyes on the boat. Also when you meet with a seller, you're able to determine whether or not they know anything about the boat. So if you're selling your boat and you've had it for 5 years, and I come and ask you questions, you're going to be able to answer them. You're going to be able to navigate and show me around the boat. But if you are selling a boat that doesn't necessarily belong to you, and I ask you questions, it's going to take you a couple minutes to come up with answers, or you're going to say, I didn't really use the boat, that's why I'm selling it, or whatever other story you come up with. So just making sure you've got somebody that can personally meet with the seller and verify the information, verify, we've all seen what like dating profiles, where like you don't want to get catfished when it comes to a boat, right? So you want to make sure that the boat matches what you think you're buying into. So I think that's a
and your suggestion to get a copy of their actual driver's license while you're there looking at the boat, I think that's the big one that's going to avoid, if somebody's pulling funny business, they're going to have a reason why you can't do that.
Right.
But hey, this is Matt. This is Matt's ID. Matt's name is on the title. All the serial numbers match. You've just eliminated a whole bunch of mistakes and headaches and expense that can come up. Not everything, but you just list a whole bunch of lines you just crossed out by doing those couple of easy things.
Yeah, and I will say too, something else to look for on the registration and title is how long ago was that registration or title issued? So, that's another thing that we come across is someone selling a boat and they've only had it for like 3 weeks. So they just had it issued in their name and now they're turning around and selling it. Well, why are you selling it 3 weeks later? What happened? What was the premise under which you purchased it? What have you done in those 3 weeks that you're turning around and selling it so quickly? So that's another thing to look for when you can personally see that paperwork. You can look at things like that. Check the name, check the length, check the year, check the manufacturer, and check the dates and make sure the dates make sense, or if they're in Tennessee, why do they have a Georgia registration? Things like that.
Yeah, so, and there's times where there could be a make sense answer. Hey,
right.
My family lives in Nebraska, and my brother's got his boat in Missouri. Well, that's where the lake house is. There are times when it makes perfect sense, and if it can be explained clearly, and like you said, there's no hesitation of how did that come about?
Right.
And you'll be able to tell. But that's great. I love that.
I was talking with my boss just before the call, and we were talking about the different types of scams, and I mentioned the widow scam, as a common, my spouse just passed away, there's too many memories, I want to sell the boat quickly. And I literally just 2 months ago sold a boat for a family member who had passed away. And I was like, wait a second. I swear it's because the family member passed away. And I had a good laugh about it because here I am talking about these kinds of scams. And, it just goes to show you that the majority of the time it is good. We don't want to deter you from boating. It is good. But there are things that you can do to make sure it's always a good experience. That's all.
Yeah. That's too funny that happens. Are the recently divorced and I've got to sell it and I'm sticking it to the ex. So I'm going to ask you a favor. I stumbled across whatever's the huge long acronym of the organization and National Safe Boating Allegiance Alliance. I was like, holy crap, that's a long acronym when I found it. But there was a lot of data on there that I was trying to pull out for this expo. Do you have a list of all of the states and the registration agencies and kind of contact information for each of those states? Is that something you'd be able to provide for people that are in this expo?
I would. I will say that the list of names are typically who law enforcement contacts. It's the registration and titling representative in each state, but it's typically who law enforcement contacts. Your best bet is to contact your local office. But I also want to put it out there that if somebody is having trouble with something, they're certainly welcome to contact us as well. We have these relationships with every state. So if there's something we can help you with, even if you're not a customer of ours, if there's something we can help you with, don't hesitate to reach out, because at the very least, we can better direct you to someone that might be able to help. But I can definitely provide you that list. It is available publicly for people to use. It's just that typically you're not necessarily going to get that person. You're going to get somebody in that office. And you might have a better experience contacting your local agency directly.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, that I stumbled across that, and I've got USA Water Ski is in the expo, and I was like, man, this is some great information that I need to pull that out and put it in a good format. So that was kind of unexpected from me. So I appreciate you playing along.
Right.
Any other advice or things that I should have asked you about that I didn't from your experience that you guys see there, kind of on the inside of some of the scams and frauds that are out there and issues?
Yeah, I mean, I think we talked about most of them. I think it's really important to do your due diligence. Again, when it comes to survey, check the whole identification number, make sure it matches, get as much history about the boat as you can, verify what they're telling you. Trust yet verify, absolutely. So I think those are the main things that I would want someone to take away from this conversation. I can't think of anything else besides if you think it's too good to be true, then trust your intuition. It doesn't mean that it's not a legitimately good deal, but just make sure that you're sitting back, you take 5 minutes to sit back and say, why would someone sell this boat? Does all of the information add up? Does it make sense before you get into a situation like that? And contact us and let us help you. Let us do a little bit more research on our side and see if we can, check it out. I guess another thing that you could do is if, in the case of this customer that we helped last week, where they were buying from a shop that considered themselves consignment, is, look into the reputation of the person selling the boat. So if you're buying from a dealer or broker, obviously a reputable dealer or broker is a great way to go. But look into the reputation and make sure that the reviews are good, make sure that there's a history there. If you can, Google how long the website's been up, how long they've been at that location, are there negative reviews? And if it's a private seller, do they have social media? When I buy something off Facebook Marketplace, I always go to that person's profile and I try to make sure that information is going to match up, that it wasn't a profile that was just created 3 days ago and, that they only have 3 friends. So you can do that kind of research as well. You can look a little bit more into things just to make sure that you know who you're dealing with.
Yeah, I love that social media. I do that exact same thing. And it just, hey, one more thing, reducing risk. You mentioned something that I wanted to ask. If I'm buying a used boat or a consignment boat from a dealer or a broker, is there a chance that they already have a boat history report? And is that a valid one? Should I get a new one? Or is that one going to be accurate and up to date?
Yeah, that's a great question. So our reports have the date stamped on them. So you'll be able to see what date it was run, and the information is accurate up to the date that it was run. And right now, all dealers and brokers can actually use our service for free. So there's no reason that they shouldn't be able to offer it to you. So if you are buying a boat from a dealer or broker, all you need to do is ask them for their report, and they have free access. So they should be able to provide it to you. And if they're not providing it to you, you might want to ask why.
But yeah, perfect. That sounds good. Well, if somebody is interested in getting a boat history report, we're going to have a link in this expo below this video. Like I said, I will get a small fee for that. You pay the same price if you went to boathistoryreport.com. And it's going to be the same price as if you got it through our link. We'd appreciate the support if you want to do that. But if you're looking at a used boat, ask your dealer, ask the broker, or get your own and just reduce that risk a little bit. And I love the commercial. If you've been searching boats for a while and you've watched some YouTube videos, you have probably seen this commercial. We're going to play it when we wrap up, so stick around to the very end. It gave me a chuckle the first time I saw it, and now I bet I've seen it 5 dozen times. It's everywhere. So nice work on that.
Yeah, we had some fun with that. And I do want to say, support the small business. So a lot of people, like, they don't want to ask the dealer or broker for it because they're not ready to make that connection. And so, absolutely support the small local businesses. That's what we do. So
yeah, that's for sure. And the relationship with the dealer that you have, and the local technician or whoever, those relationships are so key in boating. And it's nice to have a boating friend like Caroline here, that's kind of in your corner and helping you out. So thank you so much for sharing all this information. I promise you've just helped a dozen, I don't know how many hundreds of families that were going to make a mistake, and now they've got the information to avoid it. So thank you so much for participating, and now watch this little commercial and be ready for a chuckle.
All right, what do we think? 30 grand? It's all yours, huh?
Yeah, it looks good. Just show me the boat history report.
What? No. I mean, no need. I personally inspected her. She runs great. Never lie to you. All right, fine. Throwing a free windshield washer.
Can we go home now? Yeah, something smells fishy.
Just show me the boat history report.
Hull cleaning. Every hull cleaning. Hey, where's Kayla?
She called out sick today. Paid now.
You know, on second thought, I think it actually...
Three vendors. Come on, lay him down, Johnny.
Get me off this boat!
It's more. We'll find a sucker soon enough.
You could try to sell a boat with a clean history report, right?
Not paying you to talk about. We'll find someone.
Boat History Report provides you with the boat's history, so you